Happiness is beautiful, it's a kind reality. Happiness is the highest good, happiness is free. So let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy.
Welcome to the Happiness Show. This is George Ortega, and I'm here to talk about happiness because happiness is, always has been, and always will be the point of it all. Okay, tonight we're going to be talking about the importance of valuing happiness. And let's first start off with what it means to value happiness. Basically, I think first we have to understand that happiness is our basic goal in life. I mean, once we understand that, then we put everything in perspective and see that it's very important to value happiness because it is the goal, the point of life. It's why we're here. And then we have to valuing happiness. What it means to value happiness is we've got to value it over the other goals that we set for ourselves in life. Goals like success and making money and establishing prestige and having power and just succeeding with projects. Whatever it is. I mean, we set a lot of goals for ourselves throughout life, and valuing happiness as much as it should be means putting everything else in perspective. Now, I've got to talk about goodness with regard to this because, as Aristotle said, happiness is the highest good. So, so happiness actually is a form of goodness, and I think that when it comes to valuing, I think we should always value goodness probably on a par with happiness. Not trying to be so good that our happiness is greatly diminished, but not being very happy at the expense of goodness. Okay. Then the next thing we've got to understand is that that everything we do in life is really intended to bring happiness. I mean, that's this is hardwired into us. It's biological. I mean, the psychologists refer to a hedonic principle that deals with the idea that basically we're pleasure seekers. That human beings are designed to seek pleasure, to acquire pleasure, to experience pleasure, and this is all of us. At every moment of life, we're trying to do that. I mean, there's also that's known as the pleasure principle. Freud talked about it, and other psychologists. Then what goes along with it, of course, is we realize that we can't just do whatever we want to get pleasure, because we know from experience that some pleasures are actually counterproductive. They actually diminish our long-term happiness and could be dangerous. And also, then there's this other principle called the reality principle, and that's where goodness comes in. That's it kind of modulates or moderates the pleasure principle to see that the pleasures that we seek and try to attain are in fact worth attaining. All right. So let's see. Now I want to talk about why it's important to value happiness because well, all right. Let's see. The first thing is it's really important to value happiness in order to maintain it and increase it. I mean. If we begin to value other things in life, like goals, like other kinds of, situations in life, then that's gonna distract us from our main goal. So, so again, in order to maintain happiness and increase it, we've got to value it. Otherwise we won't put in the kind of work that's necessary, in order to increase it. Let's see. Then naturally, the more we value it, the more we're going to work on it. It's like with anything. Some of us value art greatly. That's a good example, I think. There are dancers and artists, musicians that they value their art so much that they're willing to sacrifice their whole lives for it. Their social lives, economic lives, and all. So so basically. It's the same with happiness. The more we value happiness, the more we will work on it. The more we work on it, the better we'll get at it. And a lot of times what happens is it's kind of like an upward spiral. The happier we become, the more we realize how valuable happiness is to our lives, which will make us work on it more, become happier, value it more, and work on it more. And I mean, you know, and things get better and better. Okay, and I think the other reason why it's very important to value happiness is because of its many, many benefits. I mean, happiness is like, you know, it's been studied, you know, for 40 years, as I've mentioned before. And I just want to go through the different kinds of the benefits that have been, you know, demonstrated scientifically. You know, scientists have, you know, basically determined that that all these benefits that I'm going to list accrue from happiness and becoming happier. Okay, firstly, happy people enjoy better emotional health. Happier people are less depressed, naturally, less suicidal, less paranoid. They suffer less hypochondria. Happier people have greater self-control and coping abilities. They're less self-centered. This is great for like parents. You know, if parents are like, you know, raising, especially maybe adolescents who sometimes are going through a period of life where, well, I think younger kids are sometimes self-centered also, but like, you know, if you're a parent and you're raising a child and the child is somewhat too self-centered, you know, work on making the child happier and he's going to become less self-centered. So, all right, less self-centeredness, more compassion. Happy people are more compassionate than less happy people. Happy people are more cooperative. You know, they just cooperate more. They're more agreeable. Then, like, happier people enjoy better physical health. The happier one is, the stronger one's immune system is. The more energy one has, the more activity one is able to do, the happier one is. And happier people tend to live longer than less happy people. So if you want to live a long time, you know, becoming much happier is a good way to go about it. Happier people have better social lives in general. They have much higher odds of getting married, and once they're married, they have much higher likelihoods to not get divorced, you know, much lower odds of divorce. Happier people have more friends, and they have just a much stronger social support network, you know, just their network of peers, friends, family are much stronger, and that really helps out in enjoying one's social life. And happier people have, as a result, much richer social interactions. You know, if they have more friends, and if they're enjoying time with friends much more, then the interactions are going to be much more pleasant, more meaningful. Okay, so and then, like, for those of us who are concerned with work, with economics and all, well, happier people have greater creativity and productivity at work. You know, they're more productive, they get more done, and and also the quality of work of happier people is higher. And I think as a result of all this, happier people tend to generally have higher incomes than less happy people. Okay, so this is why it's important to value happiness. You know, this has all been you know, studied and demonstrated in experiments, and you know, it's pretty conclusive that that becoming happier, valuing happiness, has great benefits. All right, let's see. I want to go through, like, you know, if valuing happiness is so important, then the question might come up. Well, why? How much do we value happiness right here in the United States? Okay. All right, I think historically, traditionally, we've valued it a lot. It's in our Declaration of Independence, and you know, it's actually included as a right. I mean, like, you know, we have a right to pursue happiness, and naturally, you know, we've got to value it in order to pursue it. And it's interesting that it was given as a right. I guess in feudal times, you know, maybe people didn't have a right to pursue happiness, but anyway, it is very important. You know, it's right up there. It's one of the main phrases, clauses in that document. Okay, but notwithstanding it, it really doesn't seem to be valued very much in today's culture. There are no like network or major cable television shows on it. No radio shows on it, no magazines devoted to it. I mean, we've got magazines devoted to fish. We've got magazines devoted to plants, to everything. But the thing that's most important in life for us in general and for us as individuals, no magazines is devoted to. So it really isn't valued much in the culture. Government doesn't really seem to value it much. There are no measures for happiness. You know, we measure economics, we measure pollution, we measure energy, we measure a lot of things, you know, because they're important to us. But very ironically, very perplexingly, you know, we haven't gotten around to measuring happiness. This is actually proposed in an article by the leading authority on happiness, Dr. Diener, who proposed that we should, in fact, have a national index. And because, I mean, you know, if everything government does is really for the purpose of making people happier, then certainly we should value it enough to measure it. And so, you know, it doesn't really play a part in policies, you know. Politicians don't talk about it. I mean, they don't seem to value it much. They don't. I guess they kind of consider that we don't value it much, because if we really valued it more, they would be talking about it a lot more. And of course, it's not taught in schools. You know, I've done a show on this. That, you know, especially our elementary school kids, our grade school kids, they go through school for like 12 years, and like they're taught everything under the sun except what's most important, how to be happy. And sometimes this is important, like for example, in some schools, some high schools in New York City, the graduation rate is like no higher than 40%, meaning that 60% of kids in those schools drop out without graduating. So obviously they're not very happy, at least with school. So, you know, so schools really don't value happiness. Businesses don't value really happiness. I mean, there are no businesses selling happiness. They're selling hamburgers and shoes and all this stuff, but they're not selling happiness. It's beginning, it's changing. There's such a thing now that's being developed called happiness coaches, and these are kind of like therapists for people who don't necessarily need therapists because of psychological problems, but want to become happier. And let's see. Okay, so yeah, businesses aren't selling us. Obviously, they're not really valuing it. And I guess the last few indicators that happiness really isn't valued by our culture is that we're not very successful at it. I mean, you know, the average level of happiness here in the United States, one of the happiest countries in the world really, is only 69%. That's like, you know, that's a high D. It's not even a C. And on average, you know, we're only happy about 54% of the time. So half of our time, it's like we're not happy. I mean, I think some of that time that we're not happy, we're not necessarily unhappy, but still, you know, I think we should be happy much more than 54% of the time. And lastly, at any one time, and at any given time, 25% of us are actually depressed. I mean, this is like, I find this figure hard to believe, but you know, the research pretty much substantiates it. All right, before we go on, I want to do this song, a song I wrote, and like I wrote it like several years ago, and you know, it was written more for like an adolescent, something like a 17-year-old, maybe like backed up by a band or something with drums and speakers and all. But anyway, the song is, it's called Why Not Now? And it's really about valuing happiness, you know, kind of like asking, well, why isn't everything much better? Okay.
It should be perfect, but it's not perfect. Why it's not perfect, I want to know. The pain continues, goes on and on. Why it continues, I want to know. Why can't it all be paradise? Why can't it all be paradise? I don't know why it all just can't be paradise. From generation to generation, the pain just seems to move on through. Why can't it end now? Why can't it end now? Why can't it end for me and you? Why can't it all be paradise? Why can't it all be paradise? I don't see why it all just can't be paradise. Into the future we all must go. There is no other destiny. Why can't it all be? Why can't it all be? Why can't it all be paradise? Why can't it all be paradise? Why can't it all be paradise? I don't see why it all just can't be paradise.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, there's an irony. I mean, it's something very perplexing. I mean, like, reality is incredibly perplexing because, like, when you think about it, like, it doesn't make sense. I mean, for example, space, seems to be infinite, but then how could it be infinite? Because, it should, it needs to, like, stop somewhere in a way. And same with time. Time seems to be eternal, but how could everything not have a beginning and end, And the same applies to kind of, well, we have a kind of like a conception of God as being like all good and all powerful, and that's what I was taught. I've been raised religiously, and I believe these beliefs because they make me feel good. But it doesn't make sense because, like, when you think about it, if God was all good and all powerful logically, then it would be perfect. There would be no pain. Everybody would be totally blissed out all the time. There'd be no evil. So I don't know. So yeah, some things just don't make sense, but we believe things that cause us to feel better, and that's good. Okay, so all right, back to like valuing happiness. So now I want to talk to like why we don't value it more. Since it is so important, there's so many benefits. I think probably the main reason is because we confuse means to being and becoming happier with happiness itself. In other words, we will like say to ourselves, well, if I have more money, I'm going to be happier. If I have more friends, or if I have success at something, if I'm good at something, if people praise me, or if I'm, we come up with these things that we pursue in place of happiness, thinking that they're going to be making us happier. But unfortunately, much of the research indicates that many of these kinds of strategies that we substitute for valuing and pursuing, with regards to happiness, just don't have much of an influence, unfortunately. Okay, another reason why we don't value it more is because happiness isn't really easily measured. I mean, it's not like money in a bank account, or certain kind of things like you create a work of art or something. It's there. It's like substantial. It's material. So like happiness is a lot more nebulous. It's not. You can't put your finger on it. It's. I mean, you can evaluate it. I mean, you know how happy you are, but it's just it's more ethereal. And a lot of times it's just not as enticing as the other kinds of goals we pursue, because, well, I mean, our media is just constantly drilling in our minds that we should have things and we should, be a certain way and do certain things and all. And some of these things make us happier, but a lot don't. So, okay, another reason we don't value happiness as much as we should is it's not taught in schools, as I said before. And really our parents don't really teach us so much about this. Okay, and then lastly, many of us really believe that that happiness can't be raised. That's a somewhat popular belief. It's been totally discredited by science. The science of the last 40 years. But some people still believe that, and naturally, if you don't believe that happiness can be raised, then you think, well, maybe I'm better off not valuing it. Okay, now let's get to how we value happiness more. Okay. Firstly, you know, we've got to understand very clearly and very strongly that it's our basic goal in life. I mean, that's why we're here. That's the main reason we're here. Everything we do, everything, you know, our thoughts, our feelings, they're all designed to minimize pain and discomfort and unpleasure and maximize satisfaction and pleasure and happiness and, you know, good feelings. I mean, that is why we're here. That's what life is about. So, so naturally, we should value it greatly because of that. And we should understand that, you know. The more we understand that, the more strongly and clearly we understand it, the more we're going to value happiness. And, you know, we should remind ourselves if we have to, you know, put up a sign on our refrigerator or on our mirror, you know, happiness is the point of it all, you know, just something. We can be creative with this. Something else that we can do to value happiness more is to really, really think about and value the benefits of happiness. I went through the whole list of them. You know, they pertain to our physical health, our emotional health, our social health, our economic health. I mean, that happiness just influences every aspect of our lives. And so it's just, you know, it's very important to value it because it's so important, you know, because it just, you know, so many benefits come from it. Okay, I think something else that will help us to value happiness more is, you know, conversely, to recognize the risks that come with less happiness. Now, every one of those benefits that I mentioned before has its opposite, you know, its inverse. You know, less happy people live less long lives. You know, they have fewer friends, they make less money, they're less physically healthy, less emotionally healthy. There's, you know, it's kind of like being, you know, tolerating unhappiness, accepting unhappiness, not valuing happiness and working on it is risky. You know, it's like there's a lot in life that we'd rather not go through that we can avoid by valuing happiness, you know, and naturally, of course, then working on it. So again, yeah, just recognizing that not being happy or not being, you know, very happy just has some risks associated with it. Something else we can do is to have happiness be a general interest. I mean, we value, for example, we value sports, you know, so, you know, a lot of people talk about sports a lot. They read, you know, it's the first section they go to in the paper. They really are interested in sports. They value it. It gives them pleasure. You know, there's nothing wrong with that at all. What I'm saying is that we should really value happiness enough to take that kind of an interest in it and talk about it with our friends, talk about it with our family, you know, if we're parents, with our kids, you know, just it's something that's very important to talk about it, you know, and it will help us value it, because initially talking about it might be a bit uncomfortable, because then we get to the idea, well, I mean, if the average level of happiness in the United States is only 69%, it may not be so pleasant for some people to talk about it, you know, because it's kind of like acknowledging, well, hey, you know, I'm happy, but not very. But if you stay with it, if you talk about it, if you make it an interest, you know, if you value it enough to talk about it with your friends and to think about it, then it'll increase in value, and naturally you work on it more. And as I've demonstrated, I spent like 3 shows demonstrating how easy it is to increase one's level of happiness, you know, in as little as 2 to 4 weeks with pretty much minimal effort. So, you know, one could become much happier in that way. Okay, so yeah, like in order to value happiness, another way to go about it is to work on increasing it. You know, a lot of times in life, we might not value something initially. Let's say playing an instrument. You know, we may not value it much, but then we work at it, we get better, we enjoy it, and the more we work at it, the more we value it. The same thing applies to happiness. You know, when we work on value, on becoming happier, that activity puts happiness at the forefront of our minds. You know, we're thinking about it a lot, And that process of working on it, even if we don't initially value it as much as we could or should, that process will help us to value it much more. And again, it'll work as an upward spiral. The more we value it, the more we work on it, the more we'll value it and get better at it. So yeah, it'll go like that. Okay, and last thing I want to talk about is I think in order to value happiness as much as we should, we might want to recognize the benefits that that valuing happiness and working on it could have to our world. I mean, like, for example, you know, there'd be less war and less terrorism and less threat of war and terrorism. I mean, happy people don't you know, want to start wars. I mean, you know, generally wars are, you know, started by people who aren't happy. It would make it a much more compassionate world. If we really valued happiness and worked on improving it, we would become much happier. And like, compassion is something that I mentioned is one of the benefits of happiness. This is important because, I mean, like, right now, you know, like, every year 8 million kids die of like hunger and malnutrition, you know, and that's like 30,000 each month. No, I'm sorry, 30,000 each day. You know, so so in terms of you know, the value of happiness, you know, we value happiness, we become happier, we become more compassionate, and we can help out a lot of people that really need our help throughout the world. And then also, you know, valuing happiness and becoming happier can lead to a greater concern for just the planet in general, not just people in need, but, you know, plants, animals, the ecology, the environment. You know, valuing happiness, again, leads to working on it, which leads to naturally becoming happier and to many, many benefits in that way. Okay, well, that's all we have time for tonight. Thanks for watching. In the future, we'll explore other topics designed to help us better enjoy life. This is George Ortega saying, be good, think well, feel very happy, and I hope you join me again next week here on The Happiness Show.
Happiness is beautiful. It's a kind of reality. Happiness is the highest good. Happiness is free. So let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy.